out near the site of Bill Sketoe's hole. That was a phenomenon that took place in Newton, Alabama. And I'm going to tell you the story about that and tell you the status of how that is today. But right over here is a marker that kind of gives a brief synopsis of the story. And I'm going to go into detail and read the entire account from the book 13 Alabama Ghosts and Jeffrey. But as you can see here, this is not the location where the hole is. This is just kind of a memorial to where the site actually was. But as you can see, it says the hanging of Bill Sketoe. Near this site on December 3rd, 1864, Bill Sketoe, a Methodist minister, was hanged by Newton Home Guards who thought that he was a traitor to the Confederacy. In truth, Mr. Sketoe had served 3 years in the Confederate Army and had come home on leave to see his sick wife. The Home Guard hanged him from an oak tree near the old bridge. To keep his feet from touching the ground, a hole was dug under them. This mysterious hole remained clean for many years after that sad day. The site is now part of the flood preservation area. The original bronze marker was badly damaged and washed downriver by the flood of 1990. It may be seen in the Newton Museum. Alright, now just to get a shot, this is a glimpse of the old bridge that goes over the Choctawhatchee River. Trying my best to avoid the profanity that's spray painted on the bridge, but this is the old bridge. And the location of Sketoe's hole is over north of this bridge, closer to where the new bridge stands now. As you can kind of see, that is the newer bridge that goes over the Choctawhatchee River, and that is closer to where Sketoe's hole actually was, over here. Back behind those woods right there is the old bridge, new bridge, and the hanging took place over there. Alright, so I'm going to read the story of The Hole That Will Not Stay Filled. This is by Catherine Tucker Wyndham. This book was written a long time ago, so this book actually, I don't believe it has been updated. But anyway, The Hole That Will Not Stay Filled. Nobody has ever actually seen the ghost of Bill Sketoe, but people going along the road from Newton near where the old bridge crossed the Choctawhatchee River can tell that the ghost has been there. Invariably, the hole under the tree where Sketoe was hanged is clean as if a brush broom or a pine top had swept it out. Even if the hole is heaped high with dirt every day, the dirt appears during the night, and the next morning the hole is there again. Bill Sketoe, whose ghost apparently keeps the hole cleaned out, was born in Madrid, Spain on June 8, 1818. When he was a little lad, he came with his father to Dale County and settled near Newton, a small town in the Wiregrass section of Alabama. There were not many Spaniards in that part of the country, and some people were suspicious of foreigners, but Bill was a good boy who won the respect of his neighbors, and when he grew up he became a Methodist minister. After he entered the ministry, Sketoe became known as the Bible-reading preacher from Spain, and he was invited to preach at churches throughout the area. He was made a pastor of a log cabin Methodist church at Newton, and he was a kind pastor as well as a powerful preacher. It was while he was preaching at Newton that he met and married an attractive girl, and they built a home in the community. When the Civil War began in 1861, Sketoe was one of the first men from his county to join the Confederate Army. He fought bravely for 3 years, being in the thick of many battles and miraculously escaping serious injury. Then in the fall of 1864, he received a message that his wife was very sick. Having come from a country so far away from Alabama, Sketoe had no relatives to turn to for help. His wife did not have any close relatives either, at least not any whom Sketoe felt he could ask to stay with her in Newton to nurse her. Sketoe decided that the only thing he could do was to hire a substitute to take his place in the army so that he could go home to take care of his wife. It was not at all unusual for Confederate soldiers to pay other men to fight in their places during times of personal emergencies. The asking price for substitutes was about $1,000, a lot of money for a rural Methodist minister turned soldier, but Sketoe somehow managed to scrape up the needed cash. As soon as his substitute reported for duty, Sketoe jumped on his horse and headed for Newton, making the trip home in near record time. His wife was so glad to see her husband and so relieved to have him at home that she began to improve immediately. However, her long illness had left her weak and frail, and Sketoe felt he had to stay with her until she regained her strength. The threat of defeat hung heavily over the South in 1864, and the Confederacy was in desperate need of every soldier it could get. Under these circumstances, Sketoe's prolonged stay at home began to arouse some resentment and suspicion. A few of his neighbors who knew Sketoe was a foreigner began to wonder if he might not be a traitor as well. At Newton, there were a number of men who had organized themselves to round up and punish deserters. They called themselves Captain Breer's Home Guard. There were some accusations that the Guard had been organized for the purpose of keeping its members safe at home while other men were away fighting for the South, but defenders of the unit said its members really were too old or too infirm to serve in the military forces and that they performed a commendable service for the Confederacy. Be that as it may, the Guard heard about Sketoe's return from the Army, jumped to the conclusion that he was a traitor, and laid plans to ambush him and give him a deserter's punishment. On the evening of December 3, 1864, members of the Home Guard gathered at the foot of the bridge on the west side of the Choctawhatchee River to waylay their victim. When Sketoe appeared, two men engaged him in conversation, an apparent gesture of friendship to which Sketoe responded gratefully. He answered their questions about his wife's health and even showed them the medicine he had gone to town to purchase for her. As they talked, the other men, who had been hiding in a thicket of huckleberry bushes, crept up behind Sketoe and slipped a noose of new rope around his neck. Sketoe was a big, strong man, but he was treacherously surprised. Although he struggled valiantly to escape, it was to no purpose. His arms were pinioned to his back by a tight cord, and his feet were tied together. Then his captors shoved him to the ground and took turns kicking him as they forced him to try to crawl to the deep sand. Tiring of this sport and wishing to get on with the punishment they had planned, the members of the military court threw Sketoe into a buggy and maneuvered the vehicle to a spot underneath a stout limb jutting out from the south side of a big post oak tree. This was to be Sketoe's hanging tree. At this time, Wesley Dowling, who knew and admired Sketoe, came down the road. When he saw what was happening, he stopped and began to beg the Home Guard to give their captive a fair trial. Instead of accepting this plea, one of the men gave Wesley a hard cuff and threatened to hang him too if he interfered further. Alarmed lest other passersby should see what they were up to, the men in the guard hastened their preparation for Sketoe's hanging. They threw the rope over the limb and then asked Sketoe if he had any last words. He replied that he would like to pray. This answer made the men a little uneasy, but how could they refuse to let a man have a final prayer, particularly if the man was a preacher? So they granted his request. Instead of praying for himself, as they had expected, Sketoe prayed for his tormentors. "Forgive them, dear Lord, forgive them," he prayed. This prayer so infuriated the Home Guard that even before the doomed man had finished praying, Captain Breer gave a sharp lash of his whip to the rump of the red horse hitched to the buggy. The frightened animal plunged forward, jerking Sketoe out of the buggy. Sketoe's neck should have been broken, but in making their hurried plans for the hanging in Home Guard, members had not allowed for their victim's height and size. Sketoe was tall, and his frame was not spare, so the limb to which the rope was tied bent under Sketoe's weight, and his toes touched the ground. Quickly, George Eccles, a cripple, grabbed his crutch and used it to dig a hole in the sandy soil right under Sketoe's feet, so that his toes would not touch the ground and his body would swing from the rope. The noose tightened and did its deadly work. News of what was happening near the bridge reached Newton too late for friends to save the minister's life, but several men, among them Josh Morris, Dave Young, Bill Ard, and James W. Judah, went to the spot, took Sketoe's body down from the tree, and laid it out in a cotton house across the road. He was later buried in the graveyard at Mount Carmel Church, where his tombstone may be seen today. But the story of Bill Sketoe did not end with his burial. The 6 men who had hanged Sketoe were never able to sleep peacefully at night, and not one of them would ever again walk alone outside after dark. Though they locked their doors and barred their windows, they were tormented by a nameless dread and fear. And each one in his turn met a violent death. One was killed on horseback when a limb from a post oak tree, the same kind of tree on which Sketoe was hung, fell on him. It was a still day, not a breath of wind stirring, but the heavy limb fell just as the rider passed beneath the tree. Another member of the lynch party was killed when thrown from a runaway mule that unaccountably took fright on a quiet, open stretch of road. A third member of the group was struck by lightning, and one was found dead in a deep swamp. The other two also met their deaths in mysterious ways. Almost immediately after the hanging, curious people began visiting the site of the tragedy. As time went by, they observed that the hole dug by the crutch did not fill up as an ordinary hole would have done, and there were whisperings that Sketoe's ghost was returning to the spot to keep the hole clean. Some years later, two men who were part of the crew building a new bridge over the river decided to camp on the spot where Sketoe had died. They did not believe in ghosts, so they filled up the hole, pitched their tent over it, and the braver of the two men put his bedroll directly over the freshly filled hole. They spent a fairly comfortable night. Next morning, when they broke camp, the braver man picked up his bedroll and found to his amazement that the hole was there again, although he had filled it up himself and had lain on it all night long. The hanging oak is not there anymore, but the hole is. It is about 30 inches wide, and the top of the slopes to the depth of about 8 inches. 3 young pine trees now grow close to the hole, but even their needles do not remain in it. Something sweeps them away, leaving the hole as clean and as empty as it was the day an innocent man was hanged there. Now, this book was originally written in 1969, and since then, the Choctawhatchee River flooded, and some steps were taken, some measures to support the ground better. So Sketoe's hole got washed away. The phenomena is no longer there. Where it used to sit, there's a whole lot of large rocks as a foundation around the bridge, and we'll take a look at that. I was 10 years old when the Choctawhatchee River flooded, so I never actually got to come out and see the hole myself. My brother is 10 years older than me, and some of his friends had been out there, and they actually experienced it. They tried to fill in the hole, and the next day it'd be open. They spent the night out here. But I'll show you about where the hole used to be, and then we're going to try to take a short ride to Mount Carmel Cemetery and see Bill Sketoe's grave. So here we are at the newer bridge, and as you can see, there's just tons of rocks, and you can't really see it from the angle I'm at, but there's a lot more rocks on the other side of the bridge, which is over around where Sketoe's hole actually used to be. Get a quick glimpse of that. But even though there seems to be bushes and all, not too far from me, that's all rocks, and it goes on all the way over there, and it's really about impossible to determine the exact spot of where Sketoe's hole was. Now, from my understanding, there are still some people that claim that they do have some experiences out here. Some people claim to hear strange noises and such, but other than that, the actual hole is an old legend that's still told not only throughout Alabama, but I've heard of people talking about it in other states as well. But yeah, it doesn't really exist anymore, unfortunately. But we're gonna go try to take a look at Bill Sketoe's grave, and that's about 15 miles from here in the town of Echo, Alabama. I believe it actually has an Ozark, Alabama address, but we'll go see if we can find it. We are at Mount Carmel Cemetery, and we are going to find the grave of Bill Sketoe. And here it is. This was the grave of Bill Sketoe. over to his left is his wife. This is a headstone of Sarah Sketoe, who was sick during the Civil War, and he came home to take care of before he was wrongfully hanged. To my knowledge, I haven't really heard of anything spooky that happens out here or anything. I just wanted to throw this in as part of his story. That's it. The two of them in their eternal resting place. I hope you enjoyed the story. Until next time, we'll figure out what to check out next.